There are promises that people made in public for camera, for upload, for history books.
And then there are promises that are made privately, quietly, in the deepest part of who a person is. The kind of promise nobody claps for, because nobody fully understands the weight of what is being given up. On October 31, 2023, a young woman stood before the Spanish parliament and made words that were broadcast to millions. But hidden inside those words, hidden inside that ceremony, was a private promise. One that has no ceremony, no applause, no medal, a promise to surrender something that most human beings spend their entire lives trying to protect. Their freedom to choose who they get to be. And here is why most people, no matter how many times they watch that footage, no matter how many articles they read, will never fully understand what Princess Leonor actually gave away that day. Stay with me, because this is the story they never tell you. Music softens, reflective, almost intimate tone. To understand the promise, you have to start at the very beginning. Not her 18th birthday, much earlier than that. Leonor de Borbón y Ortiz came into this world on October 31, 2005. And the moment she arrived, something was already decided for her. Something she had no vote in, no say in, no choice about. She was the firstborn daughter of Crown Prince Felipe and Letizia Ortiz, a woman who had been a television journalist, a commoner, a person who had built her own life from scratch before marrying into the palace. And the moment that baby girl took her first breath, Spain had its future queen. Not someday, not maybe, not if she wanted it. She was 8 years old when her grandfather, King Juan Carlos I, abdicated the throne. 8 years old. Most children at 8 are learning to ride a bike, worrying about spelling tests, fighting with a little sister over the TV remote. Her childhood would not be the same now that her father Felipe was crowned King of Spain. She was no longer simply Infanta, she was now the Princess of Asturias, and one day, destined to be queen. Her friends had known her simply as Leonor, but now they would have to call her Highness. Rappler. Think about that for one moment. At 8 years old, your friends have to call you Highness. The cameras start following you. The articles start being written about you. The biographers start speculating about your personality, your future, your destiny. And nobody asked you if that was okay. That is where this private promise begins. Not in a parliament. In a childhood. Music builds, slowly and deliberately. Her parents made sure she knew the importance of her position, while also allowing her to experience a childhood like any other young person. Hello. And that tension, between normalcy and destiny, is the invisible thread that runs through everything Leonor has ever done. As a young girl, she did not have a cell phone. She shared a bedroom with her little sister. She watched very little television. Hello. Now, you might read that and think, well, that's just strict parenting. But look deeper, because what those choices represent is something far more significant. Her parents were telling her, without ever saying it out loud, that the things most people chase, distraction, entertainment, privacy, the freedom to disappear into a screen, those things were not going to be available to you. Not in the same way. Not ever. Her upbringing blends rigorous academic study with deliberate preparation for her constitutional role. Unlike older royal generations, Leonor's education is publicly acknowledged as a cornerstone of her readiness, with elite institutions focused on multilingual proficiency, history, and civic engagement. St. August. She studied Mandarin, French, Arabic, English, Catalan, Spanish. She speaks English, French, Catalan, and some Arabic. AOL, this is not a girl who was raised to be decorative. She was raised to be prepared. For a role she never auditioned for. And this is the part that most people scroll past. Because we live in a world where we tell young people, you can be anything you want to be. Follow your passion. Find your purpose. Discover who you are. Leonor was never told that. She was told, you already know who you are. Now spend your entire life becoming worthy of it. That is a different kind of weight entirely. Now we need to talk about what happened when she turned 18. Because this is where the private promise becomes visible, just for a moment, before it disappears again behind ceremony and protocol. October 31, 2023. Her birthday. Her 18th birthday. And before any celebration, before any cake, before any of the things a teenager might dream about for their 18th, she had to stand in front of the Spanish Parliament and give herself away. She said, "I have solemnly, formally and publicly committed myself to our democratic principles and our constitutional values, which I fully assume. And I have assumed a great responsibility towards Spain before the Cortes Generales, which I hope to reciprocate with the greatest dignity and with the best example." Hola, read those words slowly, because buried inside them is the promise. Which I fully assume, not which I accept, not which I acknowledge, not which I understand, which I fully assume. To assume something is to take it onto yourself. To carry it, to make it yours whether you want it or not. It is the language of someone who has already made peace with a weight they did not choose, and has decided to carry it anyway. She continued, "I will conduct my actions in all areas of my life, always taking into account the general interests of our nation. I will observe behavior that deserves the recognition and appreciation of citizens. And I will fulfill my obligations with total dedication and unconditional dedication, always trying to grow as a person with the love and support of my family. In all areas of my life. Every decision, every relationship, every morning she wakes up, every private moment she might want for herself, every time she wants to be just Leonor, not the princess, not the heir, not the future queen, she has already promised that the nation comes first. Most people will never make a promise like that. Most people are never asked to. And this is why most people will never fully understand what she gave away that day." Music pauses almost completely. Silence. Then a single note. But here is the part of the story that almost no one talks about. She was not alone in that moment. Because while Leonor was making her public promise to Spain, her father, King Felipe VI, was watching from the room. And at the official lunch that followed at the royal palace, it was his turn to speak. And what he said to his daughter, in front of heads of state, generals, and dignitaries, was not a formal speech. It was a father talking to his child. About what she had just agreed to carry. King Felipe said, "You will not be alone on your path. In your family, you will find the necessary more personal support, and the Spanish people as a whole, to whom you owe yourself, will know how to recognize your dedication with their encouragement and affection." He then said something that cuts even deeper. "You must know that democracy and freedom are not built overnight, but day after day, and they require continuous care and permanent improvement. You will have that responsibility, to continue building Spain, adapting it to a world in full transformation. UFO no more." A father, telling his daughter, that democracy itself is now in her hands. That is not a birthday message. That is a transfer of civilizational responsibility from one generation to the next. And Leonor sat there, at 18 years old, and she received it. Music returns, stronger now, more purposeful. Now what happened next is what proves the promise was real. Because making a promise in a parliament is one thing. Words are easy, speeches are easy. What came after, that is where the private promise became action. The morning after her constitutional ceremony, the cameras captured something that told you everything you needed to know about who this young woman actually is. She went back to military academy. No pause, no rest, no celebrity moment. Back to early morning drills. Back to fatigues. Back to the same grueling training schedule as every other cadet, regardless of her title, regardless of the ceremony she had just been part of. Leonor entered this chapter fully aware of the discipline and sacrifice that military life requires and deeply conscious of the honor of training and serving alongside the men and women of Spain's armed forces. And it was not symbolic. She was seen undertaking grueling field exercises, rifle in hand, as well as taking part in major ceremonial moments, most notably her oath of allegiance to the flag. An oath to the flag. On top of her oath to the Constitution. 2 promises. 2 layers of the same private commitment. Then came the Navy. Speaking in Galician at her naval graduation ceremony, she showed her commitment to the values the Navy had instilled in her and her attachment to Galicia. Her words resonated not only in the Galician community but also in the royal family's closest circle. The princess hinted at a message of maturity and responsibility that would undoubtedly move King Felipe. She spoke in Galician, not Spanish, not the language of the palace, the parliament, the crown. She chose the language of the people of that region, because the promise she made was not to an institution. It was to people, real people, in their own language. That is not protocol, that is character. Music becomes warm, searching. And here is the question I want you to sit with. Because this is the part that most people miss entirely. What does it actually cost, personally, privately, humanly, to make the promise Leonor made? Think about being 18. Think about the things you wanted at 18. The freedom, the uncertainty that felt like possibility, the right to change your mind, to become someone different than who you were yesterday, to fall in love without it becoming national news, to make mistakes without them becoming political crises, to have a bad day without somebody writing an article about what it means for the monarchy. Leonor gave all of that away. Little is known about Leonor's personality. She has yet to give a media interview. AOL. Not because she has nothing to say. Because the promise she made requires her to be careful with every word. To protect the institution even when it costs her personally. To keep the private, not for herself, but so that the crown can remain stable for 47 million people who depend on that stability. Her speeches, carefully crafted, deeply rooted in civic duty, suggest her understanding of the monarchy's evolving role, not mere tradition but active service aligned with democratic principles. Saint August. She understands what she is doing. That is what makes it remarkable. This is not someone going through the motions. This is someone who has looked at what the promise requires, and chosen, every single day, to keep it. Music shifts. Final stretch. Emotional, rising. After the ceremony, Leonor stressed that the crown symbolizes the unity and stability of Spain and asked the country to trust in her. I have acquired a great responsibility towards Spain in Congress that I hope to fulfill with dignity and the best example, she said. Catalan News. Dignity. And the best example. Not the easiest path. Not the most comfortable path. The best example. That is the private promise, translated into the language that anyone can hear, but only a few truly understand. Because when she says the best example, she is not talking about attending galas and wearing the right dress. She is committing to being the kind of person, in private, that the public role demands. She is promising to be worthy of the crown even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. On this important day, which she said she would always remember with great emotion, she asked the nation to put their trust in her, just as she had placed all her trust in the future of Spain. Press reader. She trusted Spain. A divided Spain. A Spain where politicians boycotted her ceremony. A Spain where some regions give the monarchy a rating of 2 out of 10. A Spain that had scandals, fractures, uncertainty. She trusted it anyway, and she asked it to trust her back. That is not a political calculation. That is faith. And faith, real faith, is always a private promise first. Music fades to near silence. One final, quiet movement. Most people will never fully understand the promise Princess Leonor made. Because most people have never been asked to give their entire life to something larger than themselves before their life has even begun. Most people get to discover who they are. Leonor was told who she was. And instead of running from it, she ran toward it. Into a parliament. Into a military academy. Onto a naval ship. Into foreign countries, alone. Into a future where every single day, she has to choose to keep a promise that was made partly on her behalf before she was old enough to understand it. And she keeps choosing it. She said, "From today I owe myself to all Spaniards, whom I will serve at all times with respect and loyalty." There is no greater pride. UFO no more. There is no greater pride. Not, "This is a great honor." Not, "I am grateful for this privilege." There is no greater pride. The pride of surrender. The pride of service. The pride of a person who looked at the weight they were handed, and decided to lift it with both hands. That is the private promise. And now you understand it. If this video moved you in any way, hit subscribe, because we go deeper on royal stories than anyone else on this platform. And tell me in the comments, do you think Leonor truly understands the full weight of what she promised? Or will she only discover it when the crown is finally placed on her head? I want to read your thoughts. I'll see you in the next one.